friendships don't just fade because of time or because of distance. They fade because we stop showing up for them. And the truth is that if there are friendships in your life that you care about, that you want to keep, you have got to be intentional about them. Welcome to episode 14 of the Betterment Blueprint with me, your host, Teshan Fernando. When I was in high school, I had this huge disagreement with my dad over the value of friendships. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I think it was my junior or senior year of high school. And I was just sharing with him how important friendships were to me, how I really loved the friends that I had at that time. And I was just coming out of this crazy period in my life where I had lost almost all of my friends that I'd grown up with since I was a kid due to some drama, as one has in high school. And I had been integrated / created a new group of friends who was just way healthier and way better than my old group of friends. And I was just high off of that feeling of acceptance and of love and of just having a circle that I really vibed with again. I think it meant a lot more to me then because I knew what it felt like to lose it. And I was sharing this with my dad, and my dad, he was like, as you get older, friendships just aren't that important. And, I never really thought about it, but when I think about it, my parents don't have a whole lot of friends. And I know that's not necessarily standard for everybody's parents, but I think that's part of why me and my father disagreed on it. He was a pretty happy guy, really happy with his life, but he didn't really have that many friends, not like I did. And I remember just telling him, or just being confused. I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I ever let go of the friendships that I have now? My brain just couldn't compute that idea of willingly letting something that I loved so much fall to the wayside. And I can't remember exactly what he said because it's like 6 or 7, maybe even 8 years ago at this point. But he essentially said something along the lines of, son, when you get older, your priorities change. And now for me being him when he was talking about himself, now for me, my priority is you guys, my kids and my wife and my family and my career. And I just don't have as much time or energy as I did for friendships as I used to have. I used to have friendships just like you, and they used to be really important to me too, but now they're not so much. And I'm okay with that. And I thought that was batshit crazy. I really did not get it at the time. I thought it was kind of like this ridiculous excuse because to me, I felt like, and I've always felt like this, and to some extent, I still feel like this, that your friendships in your life, you can keep them for as long as you want, as long as you are intentional about making them a priority. And this whole cycle that people talk about of friendships kind of unintentionally falling to the wayside is just a bunch of bunk and doesn't have to be your reality if you don't want it to be. And now, fast forwarding to now, I realized that in a lot of ways I was right, but in a lot of ways I was also really, really wrong. And that's what I want to talk about today. So in this episode, I'm going to cover why friendships fade, why some friendships never die, how to know when to let go of a friendship, and how to know when to fight for one, and what that actually looks like. My name's Teshan Fernando. I'm a high school teacher and a teenage life coach. And graduation season is right around the corner. And whether you're graduating from high school or college, everything is about to change for you. And of course, I'm a high school teacher and a high school teenage life coach, so that's really the world that I'm a part of. And I remember just kind of this crushing weight of anticipation of what was gonna happen. What was gonna happen to my friend group? What was gonna happen to the people that I knew? What was gonna happen to the circle that I had become so comfortable with and learned to love so deeply? And I think that everyone kind of wonders about it and nobody really talks about it. And I feel like when I ask my students about it, that's kind of what I get reflected back. Now, my students are mostly sophomores, of occasional senior or two. And generally it's like there's this general sense of anxiety about it mixed in with some excitement because everyone is always excited to leave high school. It feels like your life is about to start. You know, when you're a kid, you can't wait to become an adult. But there's also a little bit of just straight up unknown, just uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. And the truth is that friendships fade. And not just when you're graduating, they fade all of the time. But they're also growing all of the time. And they're also being created all of the time. Just like everything in life. Everything in life grows and changes, fades and dies. And friendships are no different. The big thing about why friendships fade is that after high school, proximity stops doing the work for you. If you're not intentional, your friendships will fade whether you want them to or not. And once you graduate high school, it kind of becomes all on you. And I don't know if this is something I really thought about very intentionally or very consciously when I was in it, but it's something I realize very strongly now that I'm out of it, which is that as restricting of a structure as school can be, that structure provides this shared space where you're just mandatorily around the people that are in your life for almost 8 hours a day, maybe 9, maybe 7, depending on the school system you go to. But for most of the week, you're around these people that are your friends, your peers, and whether you want to or not, you're around them. And that comes with a lot of problems, of course. We all know that. But it's great. You don't really have to try that hard to get around people you could be friends with. You still got to put in the work to, actually create a friendship. You got to say hi. You got to be vulnerable. You got to hang out. But they're there. And the friendships are available to you whenever you want them, pretty much. But once you get older, once you graduate, once you leave those structures, whatever those structures are for you, it's not just school. It's the organizations you were a part of. It was the extracurriculars you were in. It's the neighborhood you live in. It's the gym that you go to. All of these things are changing when you graduate because usually you're having to move or you're moving on to a different stage of life. And life is just pulling you in all sorts of different directions. And because that proximity of the structure is not doing the heavy lifting for you anymore, a lot of the friendships just end up fading. And it's really true. I think this is one of the things that I didn't really understand when I was in high school, is that life really does pull you in all sorts of different directions. So for me personally, I went to college and I also got a job. And with that new environment that I was in, and some more context is actually the college I went to is in the same town that I went to high school in. So I was in this bit of a weird situation where a lot of the people I went to high school with also went to college with me. But even so, even though there was at least a third, I think, and my graduating class was, I think, close to 420 people, plus or minus 10 or something like that. And so a good 150 or so of those people came to college with me, and I went to Texas A&M University, and Texas A&M is a pretty big school. It's like a 50,000 plus student population last time I checked. I'm sure it's gone up by now. And so it's still it's kind of it's not really a drop in the bucket of the student population. It's a little bit more than that. But the moral of the story is that when you go to college in the same town you went to high school in, you're going to see your old circle of people a lot. And especially my freshman year, man, I would run into them all the time because I think as a freshman, you kind of just hang out in the same places as all the other freshmen because you don't know anything about the school that you're going to and you don't really have your own groove yet. But even so, even with that extra bit of social pressure, I still basically lost almost all of my friends overnight. And it wasn't this like, there was no anger or hatred or anything negative behind it. It was just purely logistical. And the only friend I really hung on to during those first few years of college was my best friend. And that's because we were roommates. And even though we were roommates, being in this new environment with a totally new group of people, it really put a dent in our friendship for a little while. Not in that it damaged our friendship, but we just weren't really spending as much time and energy on it as we had when we were in high school. And even now, I mean, now I'm 26 years old. I'm in a different city than I grew up in. And I think about how this podcast actually is a big reason why a lot of my friendships have faded. This podcast is a huge priority for me. I see it as an extension of this dream business that I'm building for myself. And it's something I see myself building for the next few decades. And a lot of times, because my time is limited, because I have a full-time job, and this takes up a lot of time, a lot of times I'm faced with this decision of, do I go spend time with the person I want to spend time with, or do I spend time on this second career that I want to be working? And I have no shame about it. I love doing this. And 80% of the time, I choose this over spending time with people. And that has put a significant dent in my social structure. I still have good friends, but I definitely don't see them as much as I could, or as much as I would if I didn't have this as a huge priority for me. And in high school, I had no idea this was something I would be doing. It's something I'd always wanted to do, but I never thought it was possible for me. There's going to be things like that for you too. Things you had no idea were going to be important to you because they're not even in your realm of possibility right now. And that's exciting. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. But it is going to affect your friendships. And I think it's something that we should all be aware of. And as these things come into your life, these other priorities, you realize that some friendships are just friends of convenience. And that's not an insult. It just means that when life stops putting you in the same place, the friendship fades. And maybe that's okay. I don't actually see friendship of convenience as a demeaning term. To me, it just means that both people aren't necessarily willing to put in the work that it would take to keep the friendship going once it's no longer convenient. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I also actually think it's kind of necessary for us as people because we have a limited amount of time and we have a limited amount of energy. And we have to be discerning about who we choose to spend our time with and where we choose to put our energy. And we can't stay close to everyone forever as a result. And so I think it's very normal and healthy to have the majority of the friendships in your life to be friendships of convenience. I think that is totally okay. The only problem that arises is when someone thinks that this isn't a friendship of convenience when it actually is. And I've been on both sides of this so many times. It's not really something we communicate to each other. I'm never gonna sit down with a friend and be like, hey, as soon as this gets stuff to do, I'm not gonna be seeing you anymore, buddy. Nothing personal. I have other priorities. So I would never say that to somebody because that would be mean. And no one has ever been insensitive enough to say that to me. Actually, that's not true. But it wasn't out of insensitivity. It was out of kindness. I told a story a couple episodes ago, but one of my bestest friends of all time here in Austin, she moved to Dallas, which is like a 4-hour drive from Austin. So it might as well be like in another state because Texas is so gigantic. But she told me straight up, she was like, hey, I really love you and I really love this friendship, but you got to know I am not the person to keep up with people once I move. That's just never really been my thing. And I don't want to set false expectations. And that hurt to hear, but I appreciated the honesty, because when she did move and when communication did eventually die out, it was easier not to take it so personally. I also think of when I graduated college, which was a crazy experience for me because it was the pandemic. Okay, so imagine this. I'm exiting the social isolation of the pandemic right as I graduate, meaning that the day I walk into the arena of my graduation is also the first time I'm seeing my peer group, all of the friends that I knew in college in like a year. I haven't seen them in person. I've known of their existence. I have kept in close touch over video call and over text. And occasionally, maybe a few of them I would see like at a park with masks on, 6 feet apart, the whole gambit. And then we get into that arena. It's called Arena. It's where all the high school and college graduations take place in that part of town. And you walk in and no one's wearing a mask. It's just like back to normal. But I haven't seen these people in forever. And it's like, it's so weird. And I think it's such a unique experience to have hey, like, holy shit, I haven't seen you in so long. And oh my God, I'm never going to see you again. All packed into the same like 3-hour experience times like 300, because that's how many people I knew like in my department. And most of those people, I remember giving them a big hug and saying, like, it's so good to see you again at the beginning of the graduation. And then at the end saying, hey, I hope you have a great life. And not being mean about it, but just being real. It's like, I'm not going to see you again. You're not going to see me again. We're not going to seek each other out. We were just friendships of convenience. And that didn't make them any less special. It just means that we have other priorities. I think I'm going to talk about this again later too, because it's it's an important piece of a different point, but there is a fine line between deprioritizing someone and reprioritizing something else. In deprioritizing someone, it's kind of mean, and it generally gets taken personally because it is kind of personal. You're saying, I don't want to be around you. Whereas reprioritizing something else that's important to you usually has nothing to do with the person that you're not seeing as much as a result. It's just kind of, hey, this is more important to me right now. You're not any less important than you were before, but this is just more important. And I think that is not something people understand very well. I think it's really easy to take it personally. And I speak from personal experience. I take that stuff personal all the time. But man, social circles can evaporate overnight. I had that experience recently in Mexico City when I went on a big trip with a bunch of friends and we had this big falling out. And I was down, like, I went to Mexico City and I had this great big group of friends from all over the country, and then I left Mexico City with like half a friend. and that hasn't changed. Like, that social circle just evaporated in the course of a week. And so I think it's just something that you have to be aware of. So, of course, we have to talk about the friends who do stick around when life gets messy. And those, as opposed to being friendships of convenience, are what I would call a friendship of intention. And a friendship of intention, I would personally define that as a friendship where both people mutually decide to make the friendship a priority in one way or another. Meaning that they continue to make time and save energy for it even when other things come up. So I have some friends, some people in my life where it's like I might have plans with them, but maybe I'm running a little bit behind on my podcast schedule, or maybe all of a sudden I need to write a speech for Toastmasters, or maybe I'm just tired. That's going to take priority over spending time with them. But then I have other friends where it's like they take priority over all of that other stuff. And like if they need to talk, I'm going to make time to talk to them. Or maybe we have a standing call every week. And so that's just an integrated part of my schedule, and it's a priority for me. Regardless of whatever else is going on in my life that week, I'm going to make time to talk to this person or call this person or spend some in-person time with them. And these are a lot rarer because both people have to agree to be on the same page and stay on the same page. And I highlight the staying on the same page part because sometimes friendships of intention don't necessarily last a very long time, because you might meet someone and be like, wow, this person is so cool and I want to make them a priority. And they're like, wow, you are so cool, I want to make you a priority. But you only make each other a priority for like 3 months. And that's okay. You know, I don't think that takes away from the value of a friendship. I think it's not going to be as deep as a friendship you've had with someone for years and years. But just because you only know someone for a few months and then they leave your life doesn't make that time you had with them any less special. It just makes it different. And I think that friendships can kind of transition between a friendship of convenience and a friendship of intention. I've had friendships, a friend that I'm like getting to know now, someone I knew in college because they were dating one of my friends. And when they were dating one of my friends, we got along so well. We were like brother, sister. It was awesome. And then they broke up and we kind of lost touch. And recently we reconnected, and we have been just like, they live in her and her boyfriend now, they live in like a different state. And so we just like hop on a video call and get some work done together sometimes. And we started off as friends of intention, and we shifted into friendships of convenience. And that friendship sort of took a break when they broke up with my friend. And now it's once again a friendship of intention. And it's really nice to have this person in my life again who knew me really well when I was younger, and is like someone I can just be myself around. It's like really, really cool to have a friend like that again. And I have friends now who like are friendships of convenience, and they weren't friends of intention. They were friends of intention before, and they might never become friendships of intention again. And that's okay. That doesn't make the time that we had together any less special. Just the way that the cookie crumbles. And the other big reason why friendships fade, and I think this one is probably not as talked about as much. I think the logistical one is really obvious, and we can all kind of relate to that. But the other reason that is perhaps even more important is that we are always changing. And one of the hardest parts about growing up is realizing that not everyone is going to change with you. And you're going to have to grow in different ways to meet the challenges of your life. And there are no guarantees that the friends that you had will grow with you or grow in the same direction that you are. And I think as you start to live a more intentional life, a major question that starts to pop up when you meet somebody new or you're starting to get closer with somebody is, are we changing in the same ways? Or are we changing in the same direction? The friendships in my life that have been the deepest and have lasted the longest have always been people who have been focused on growing in the same direction that I am. And I know that sounds so great on paper, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Because when you are friends with someone who is growing in the same direction you are, that means that the things that are important to them are also important to you. Meaning that if you weren't friends, you would still be doing the same things. So being friends just means that you were both doing the same thing you would already be doing alone, but now you're just doing it together. And that is just the most beautiful form of synergy. For example, I have recently joined an organization called Toastmasters. In Toastmasters, if you haven't heard of it, is an organization where you practice public speaking. And the chapter here in Austin, it's an international organization. So if that's something you're interested in, please check out their website and see if they have a chapter in your city or your town. They probably do. But our Austin chapter is, North Austin chapter is like 40 people strong. So it's like a pretty big group of people. And communication is something that's important to me. I communicate as a teacher, I communicate interpersonally, I communicate on this podcast and on my YouTube videos. Something that I want to be and continue to get really good at. And I also hope to someday transition into a state or a place in my life where I can give these sorts of podcast talks, but in person. I think that would be the coolest thing ever, like with a live audience, and man, that would be awesome. And so I joined the organization because I wanted to work on my speaking skills. And I didn't even really think about it. I was just doing it for me. But I met all of these people who were like so into growth, like as into growth as I am, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but it's clearly a priority for them. And it's so cool because that is something I don't just want in my friendships. I need it in my friendships. I look for it. I crave it in people who just care about growing. Because to me, it's so important. It's hard to put into words. I think growth saved my life when I was a kid, and it has only made my life better as an adult. And it is a huge part of my personality. And so to meet other people who are similar, I mean, it's just so cool. It leads to such good interactions and such good fun. And we're all in this organization together, and we all want to grow individually. We all joined because we want to become better public speakers, and we get the benefit of being around other people who want the exact same thing we do. And we don't even really have to put that much effort into the friendship because we're just being us. It's so great. It's so cool. In college, I was really into singing. So I joined an a cappella. It's the same thing. I found this group of people who loved to sing as much as I did, and who were better at it than me, and wanted to get better at singing. And it just pushed me to a whole nother level and gave me experiences with music that I just could not have gotten otherwise. And those friendships eventually kind of faded because I started growing in a different direction. Music is still really important to me, but it isn't something I am super intentional about spending a ton of time on. I'm not really trying to develop my singing voice or my musical instrument skills. It's kind of on the back burner for me. And so those friendships have kind of faded. And I think, I don't know, because I don't talk to them anymore, but I think similarly for them, there are other priorities, and our priorities just don't line up so much anymore. And so now we're just not as close as we used to. That doesn't make the time that we spent in that a cappella kicking ass nationally any less special. It'll always be special. We're just not on the same page anymore. And that's okay. And I think I could say the same thing for this Toastmasters organization. Right now, working on my public speaking is so important to me. And I don't think I'm as naive as I once was to think that it'll always be important to me. There will be other priorities and other groups that I have to join to develop myself. And I may not be able to be in Toastmasters forever. And so some of those, if not all of those friendships, might fade. And that's okay. That isn't going to make this time that I get with them any less special or any less important. Which leads me to my next topic, which is friendships that never die. And I mean this in the most positive way possible. I mean those friendships that they're just these certain people that you just know, no matter how much time passes, you're always going to be good. You're always going to be solid. And it almost feels completely independent of how much time or effort or energy you put into those friendships. They're just good. And I think these people are very rare and very special. And I think that thinking about them actually teaches us a lot about what makes friendships really, really click, like what makes them really, really special. And for me, I think about the two things that have, and I want to say, I want to be clear. There's friendships that never die. And then there's friendships where you can not talk to them for years and years and then touch base with them, and it's like nothing ever happened. Like you never lost touch in the first place. And those two things are kind of separate for me. The two pieces that you need to truly create a close friend, a friendship that's never going to die, is consistent communication and consistent vulnerability. And I think if a relationship is really important to you, you need to ask yourself, am I being consistently communicative? And am I being consistently vulnerable? And if you're really, really serious about the friendship, you should ask yourself, how can I facilitate a consistent level of communication and vulnerability with somebody? Because I've had a lot of friends who are one, but not the other. You know, I have some friends who the vulnerability is just like on 10, and they're just so real with me, and I can be so real with them, and it is so much fun. But the time that we spend together is so inconsistent that I don't necessarily feel super close to them. I feel like I could be really real with them, but they're not necessarily the person I'm going to call up when I'm feeling down, or when I need to talk, or when I want to celebrate something that I'm really excited about. They're not the person I'm going to call, because it's been inconsistent. And because of that inconsistency, to some degree, it's kind of an unreliable friendship. And I don't mean that necessarily in a demeaning way. I just mean that you can't reliably call upon them. And that's okay. Not every friendship needs to be reliably call uponable. But I've also had friendships that are extremely consistent, but the vulnerability is just not there. People who are so willing to just hang out every single week or talk every week, but they're just not very vulnerable. They're just not very real about what's going on. Or they create this sort of environment where it's really difficult for me to be vulnerable. And the friendship also just doesn't feel very close. And I think to some degree, friendships of convenience can sometimes fall into this category, because the people you work with or the people you go to school with, you could see them very consistently and the vulnerability could be very low. I think about my students and how... So in one of my periods, there's these two kids, and they are like pretty friendly. They like kind of look out for each other. They talk to each other. And they recently did a project together. And they were like almost done. And so there was one student who did like, I don't know, like 80% of the work. And the other student did like 20. And they were both fine with that. There's no hard feelings or anything like that. But student who had done 80%, they were like, okay, I'm going to go get lunch. Like, do you mind finishing up the last bit? And they were like, okay. And so they finished. And they were about to turn it in. And I was like, did you put your names on it? Both of your names. And he was like, no, I don't know their name. And I was like, what? In my head, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how do you not know this person's name? Like, you talk to them almost every day. You dab them up. You say hello. Like, you just did an entire project with them. You don't know their name. But I think it's just a classic example. I mean, how many names of the people that you work with do you know? I think it's easy to judge that situation, but I think we do the exact same thing. I don't know all of the teachers that I work with. There's students that I see every day that are not in my class. I have no idea who they are, because I've never said hi to them and they've never said hi to me. You know, so just, I think that's more of an extreme example, but I think it points out nicely how consistency is not enough. You got to have vulnerability and time consistency to really create those like mind-blowing, heart-expanding friendships. Which I do want to talk about how there are those some friends where you don't talk to them for years, and when you do, it's like nothing changed. And I don't think that happens because of luck. I think it happens because who you are fundamentally hasn't changed much. And I think also when we kind of explore this a little bit more, this makes a lot of sense too. If you meet someone and you guys click and you vibe and you become friends, and then you fall out of touch for a couple of years, and then you meet up again, maybe randomly or maybe intentionally, you see them at a coffee shop, or you realize they're living in your city or they're visiting or whatever, and you hang out. If you haven't fundamentally changed as a person and they haven't either, there's no reason why it wouldn't be just as great as the first time, right? It maybe, if not even better, because now you have this like underlining relationship that you've already developed. So it makes perfect sense. And just like you're able to connect really well the last time, you'll be able to connect really well this time too. I would say though, those people where I can like lose touch with them and then reconnect with them without any problems, I think those friendships are so cool. I think it's like something special, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself very close to them. And I mean, I don't love them. Doesn't mean they're not important to me. It just means that for me, that doesn't really meet my definition of close, because that consistency it isn't there, and they're missing significant parts of my life, and I'm missing significant parts of their life. So it doesn't really feel right for me to categorize those relationships as close. And I bring all this up because, and honestly, I should have said this at the beginning, the reason this is so important is because your health as a human being is directly related to how healthy your social relationships are. There are so many studies on longevity, so how long you live, that are directly related to how rich your relationships are, how rich your friendships are. And if you want to live a better life, which I'm assuming you do, that's why you're listening to this podcast that's all about living a better life, making your life count, living with intention, you have got to take your relationships and your friendships specifically seriously, because they are a serious part of who you are as a whole. But let's not forget that as amazing and as incredible as a friendship can be, and as many years as they can add to your life, the wrong friendship can be horrible. It can totally ruin your life. I'm going to try so hard not to use a bunch of curse words, but they can seriously take years off of your life. And I think letting go of friends and the process of pruning relationships in your life is something that we should all be really, really good at. And I just want to preface this by saying that letting go of a friendship doesn't mean that there's beef. It just means that we're on different paths now. And I want both of us to keep moving forward. I think of people as all running their own races. We are all running our own races on our own paths and at our own paces. And most of us will never cross paths. We'll never see most of the people in our lifetimes. We'll never really connect with them. And that's perfectly normal. A few people will run side by side for a while before they part ways. And fewer still are actually running the same race that you are. And this is generally how I view society. We're all doing our own thing. We're all trying to accomplish and achieve things in our lives in the ways that we want to. Sometimes that lines up. Most of the time, it doesn't. And if you try to hold on too hard to a friendship that you shouldn't be holding on very hard to, you run the risk of A, pulling yourself off your own path, or B, pulling them off of their path. And I think most commonly, you both just get pulled off of your own paths. I think for me, I've been very acutely aware of the impact that friendships can have in my life from a very young age. And I totally credit that to personal development books. It's just a really commonly referenced concept. And maybe you've seen the posters in your schools. And it's like, I remember the one in my high school where it's like 5 pencils and 4 of them are really sharp and 1 of them is broken. And the quote is, your circle will bring you up to their level, or I'm paraphrasing horribly, but the like personal development paraphrasing is that you rise to the level of your circle, or in a lot of cases you fall to the level of your circle. And for me, I've always had really clear goals in life, again as a result of personal development. That's just how I was raised. My parents raised me to be like that, and personal development raised me to be like that. And so for me, the friends in my life are always measured against what I'm trying to go for in life. They're always measured against what's important to me. There's me and my central mission, and then my friends are either supporting me on that mission or they're pulling me off of that mission. And I don't really have that many friends who are I'm just friends with them purely for the sake of friendship. And, honestly, that probably sounds pretty bad, but I think it's really, really important to be intentional about as much as you can in life. You can't be intentional about everything. I think we'd all lose our minds. But people just have such a big impact on who we are and where we go. And so we have to be really, really careful about who we let into our circle. Because if your goals are important to you, if who you are is important to you, then you have got to be cognizant of who you're letting into your life, because they are going to significantly affect the path you're on and the pace you're running it at. Significantly affect those things. And I love this idea of having a mission first and friends who support that mission, because it leads to a life where the life you're trying to live and the friends you're living it with, there's very little friction in between. And it leads to all of these beautiful moments where you are accomplishing things that you both want to accomplish, but you're doing it together. You're learning from each other. You're gaining experience from each other. And it's this crazy synergy that you just can't accomplish on your own. I mean, it's the whole reason like teamwork is a thing, right? We can just get so much more done when we're on a team, a good team, versus by ourselves. And I think, man, this is a bit off the cuff here, but I'm just thinking about how like we have all had the distinct displeasure of working on a bad team where not everyone is focused on the same thing. I have been in so many groups in high school and in college where some people cared too much about the project and some people did not care enough compared to me, right? It's all subjective. And there's a few teams I've been on where everyone was on the same page, and those teams were awesome to be a part of. They were so much fun to be a part of because we all wanted the same thing and we were all serious about getting there in the right way. And so we freaking crushed it. And it was just a high. Like, teamwork is such a high for me when it goes well. And I think you should think of your friendship circle like a team. And you should all be working towards the same thing. And I'm not necessarily saying you have the same very specific goals. Like, no one in my circle is trying to build a coaching business for teenagers. That is, I've not heard anyone else share that sentiment with me. But we're all trying to get something out of life. We're all trying to live our life to the fullest. And that looks different for all of us. I have one friend in New York who is probably one of my oldest friends at this point. And I just traveled to go see him. And his lifestyle is so different from mine. It's so beautiful. It's so social. It's way more laid back. And I stayed with him for 2 days. And it was such a blast. I mean, he wasn't doing anything special. He was just living his life the way he normally does. Seeing his friends, hanging out, going to pickleball, singing karaoke, getting breakfast, just hanging out, just having a good time. And I've never lived my life that way. That's not how I want to live my life. My life is way more like work and like goal orientation and purpose driven. And I'm like, I've got a mission I'm trying to accomplish. And I wake up at 4:30 and I go to bed at 8 and I have all my habits. And it's like, it's a way different way of living. But we have so much love and respect for each other. And I wouldn't want to live my life the way he lives it. And he would not want to live my life the way that he would not want to live his life the way that I live it. That wouldn't work for either of us. But we share this mutual goal of getting the most out of life. We just simply have different ways of doing that. And we connect on that central philosophy of not wasting this gift of life that we have been given. And to a greater extent, all of my friends are like that. And I have some friends that are very much like me, friends that are very much not like me, but we are all connecting on the central tenet, which is my central tenet for life, which is just live life as hard as you can. Just squeeze every freaking ounce of life and love and joy out of it as you can. Because why the heck not? Why the heck not? I think of a story of a life I used to live at a previous job. And this job, the majority of the people who worked there were younger people, like in their early 20s. And so there's like this big party lifestyle. And all of the coworkers, they would go out to party on the weekends, and sometimes after work, they would hit up a happy hour. And it's like not a life I had lived much. I had never really lived my life like that. And so I was really curious. And so I tried it out and I was like, wow, this is so much fun. I can see the appeal. I can see why people party every weekend and go to happy hours after work. I mean, this is cool. I really feel like I'm a part of a community. And I made some friends who lived their life that way. And just me, the way that I am, when I get into something, I really get into something. And so I was like, let's start organizing these parties. Like, let's be the people for this. And so I would start organizing parties and bringing people together and, figuring out the logistics. And it was a lot of fun. It was a really good time. And I developed a very close friendship with another guy who's very similar. He loved planning the parties. He loved being the creator of these social experiences. And we connected over that. But eventually, the friction of partying every weekend and drinking on a weekday really started to get in the way of the other aspects of my life. Because, like I said, that's not really how I lived my life before. And that's not really how I wanted to live my life either. It was just trying it out, just having a good time. And a lot of friction started to develop. Because I started to pull away from the party lifestyle. And of course, his first reaction was, bro, like, why aren't you showing up to parties anymore? Maybe you've been in that situation before. I hear my students talking about it all the time. Lord, why didn't you pull up? I texted you, or we asked you to hop on the game and you never hop on. And there's a little bit of guilt in those phrases. There's a little bit of like, what's up, bro? Like, you're too good for us now? Like, what's going on? And there's friction. And like, it totally destroyed our friendship. Because I felt so much pressure to do things that I didn't want to do. And I think he probably felt judged by me, because that's the assumption we always make. That's the assumption we always make, that it's about us. It's something that we did when someone doesn't want to hang out with us anymore. And I didn't really have any, too much against him. I just didn't want to live my life that way. And so there was a ton of friction, and it just really fractured a pretty good friendship. So I think you can kind of avoid all of that if, before you ask if someone belongs in your life, you ask yourself, where are you headed? And if they help you get there, cool. And if not, it might be time to let go. So that leads us to the last kind of odd situation that always comes up, which is, when should you fight? Because you can't fight for every friendship, but every once in a while there's one that's worth it. And when that moment comes, you'll feel it and you'll regret it. You will regret it if you don't try. And I think this is so important to talk about, because sometimes you can be exactly the right person and you can do everything right, and a friendship can still fall apart. And in those scenarios, when you know that this is one of your people and something has come up, maybe it's like a fight or a miscommunication or a logistical difficulty, that's when you should fight. And regrettably, I'm honestly not the greatest at this. Especially when I was younger, I would take things really personally. I was the guy where if you didn't hit me back in like a couple hours, I'd be like, what's your problem? Like, what's going on? And it was worse because I would never say it, right? So they wouldn't even know that I was upset. I would just feel that way. I'd just be butthurt. Passive aggressive. And I have had friends in my life who, through no fault of their own, maybe they just forgot to hit me back, or maybe they just got busy and I took it personally, and our friendship kind of started to fall apart. And I wasn't willing to fight for it. I wasn't willing to be vulnerable, because really, when it comes to the context of a friendship or a relationship, fighting for it always means be more vulnerable. If you are having a fight with somebody, or you feel like someone isn't really vibing with you, and you want to fight for the friendship, what does that look like? You're going to have to send a text or give them a call and say, hey, what's going on? I miss you. Did I hurt your feelings? Did I say something I shouldn't have? And we don't, when you are at my age, so I'm 26, right? When you've lived as much life as I have, and I'm not calling myself old, it's just you figure out pretty quickly that it is very uncomfortable to be vulnerable and ask again when you feel like someone doesn't want your presence, because we all hate rejection. And can you imagine hitting somebody up and saying, hey, it's been a little while, like, what's up? And they're like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, I don't want to do this with you right now or ever. That would really hurt. That would be really, really uncomfortable. And we don't want to be in that situation, but that's the situation we have to put ourselves in if we want to fight for a friendship. And when I was younger, that's the situation I was too afraid to put myself in. And thankfully, I had friends who were willing to do that. I would go months not texting someone back because I was butthurt about something, and they'd hit me up and be like, hey, I miss you. Can we get back to being friends? Like, what's going on? They would be vulnerable. And that vulnerability, that can really cut through a lot of the bullshit. And I really respect that about those friends who are willing to do that, because it's so vulnerable and it's such a real thing to do. And it's something that I have gotten a lot better at because my friends are so good at it. They have taught me how to fight for my friendships and what that looks like. And so I really want you to take this part to heart, because I think that the regret that a lot of us feel when it comes to friendships is because we didn't fight when we know we should have. We didn't say what we know we should have said. We didn't hold our tongue when we knew we should have. There's all these regrets, and it's so rarely about the person you barely knew. It's always about these like friendships where you could have saved it and you just did it. because you were afraid to be vulnerable. And if you're ever in that situation, just ask yourself, how can I be vulnerable right now? How can I be vulnerable right now? Because that's the only way you're going to cut through all the ego and the other crap that gets in the way of friendships, is you have to be vulnerable. So I know that as I've been talking about this, and as you've been listening, which, by the way, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to me that someone popped into your head. I know. When I was talking about this, someone invariably popped into your head, because it's such a personal thing. Friendships, they're so important. Maybe it's a friendship you haven't talked to in a long time. Or maybe it's a friend you talk to all the time, but you just haven't been very vulnerable with them. And I want you to send them a text. And I'm going to do it too. I'm going to do it with you, because there was someone that popped into my head too. I'm not perfect at this. We're all in this together. We're all just trying to live better lives together. So send a text to that person. Do it right now. Don't even wait for the episode to end. Just do it while it's playing. And if you're feeling really courageous, give that person a call. Don't warn them. Just give them a call. If they don't pick up, leave a voice message or send a text. And while you're at it, if you think there's someone that would benefit from hearing this episode, then please send it their way. And if you aren't already, it would mean a lot if you went ahead and subscribed, so that I can keep delivering content just like this to you on a regular basis. Thank you so much for your time and for your energy. And remember that I am rooting for you.